Ideology births the policy. Ignorance implements it in a place that it's not fit for, and then inertia carries it on. Hi, I'm Mbonusi Obigili, and here goes Pedagogy, where I talk to you about social, political, and economic matters in the form of a 1,000-word essay to grow your mind. Subscribe and keep watching. Personally, I believe or I think that the cycle of poverty would continue in poor countries because if you are playing catch up in a world as fast as ours, chances are very high that you would never catch up. Development policies are often driven by ideology, ignorance, and inertia, according to Banerjee and Duflo, the authors of Poor Economics. Today, I would be discussing these three I's in the context of African countries. The first I will discuss is ignorance. Ignorance is basically designing policies or trying to implement policies based on poor understanding or wrong assumption of the area. For instance, there are policies of eliminating school fees in Kenya and in Uganda, but we must define what a policy outcome should be if we want. Anyway, well, policies are just guidelines, rules that if we follow, we will have this outcome. And so if we have a defined policy outcome, such as increased learning or higher nutrition in children, which could lead to less hospital visits, we need to define the policy outcome. So there was this policy in Uganda, Kenya, which eliminated school fees, but even though it increased enrollment, it still did not increase learning. So if learning is the outcome that we want from a policy, we can't go about it through, let's say, just eliminating school fees, because there are other hidden costs of why people don't show up to school. It could be transports, and sometimes it's uniforms, sometimes it's overcrowded classrooms and things like that. So we need to define why people are not showing up and tackle that particular thing, or define the sets of reasons and tackle those reasons by themselves, and not just an umbrella policy of, let's take away school fees to increase learning. No, you will increase enrollment, but you will not increase learning. And of course, learning is different from enrollment, because people can actually be enrolled but they're not showing up still, or they are not even passing the test that is a measure of how much they have learned. So yeah, ignorance is one, and this is how they have explained it in their book. But also, I would think that for Nigeria, one of the examples of ignorance that I'll give is how we basically just keep these our divisions. South south, what does it mean to have south south? There's already south in it. Like, it's already southern. Why is it south south? It's like, is it more south than the other south? I don't know. Like, I think these cuttings are actually dividing us more than is solving any problem. If there are structural problems that we have, it's actually because of these very unrealistic regional political divides, right? I think that we need to check again what problems have these solved. I don't think any, but yeah. So yeah, ignorance is number one, according to the authors, in designing policies that would be ineffective, designing policies without understanding the area. There was also an instance about fertilizer, how fertilizers were handed to farmers, and they didn't use them because they didn't have credit systems, and they did not also have cash flow to be able to feed the fertilizer into their schedule. And so crops weren't doing better before the fertilizers were made available. You know, they weren't doing better than before the fertilizers were made available. So yeah, it's really just about understanding the area and just making sure that you're addressing the problem, right? Food is different from nutrition. Do you want to increase food in households, or do you really want them to have nutrition? Because you can eat so much rice, but then if we introduced maybe more protein, then these children would have a better diet. But how do you do that, right? You have to design things with knowledge of what is actually lacking. And yeah, it's really just insightful to see that it's not really about food, it's about nutrition. It's not really about healthcare being reachable, but it's about prevention. Actually, why should we even get sick to that point? So yeah, really, for the first I, which is ignorance, there's just so many places that you can see it within the continent. And secondly, I would move to ideology. So ideology is basically a system of ideas and ideals that we use to set up economic policy or economic theory or even like political theory. So you know how there's this ideology, there could be this ideology about, food for the masses. Or let me take a very, very popular example. In Nigeria, there was fuel subsidy, and at some point people would say, we need to keep fuel subsidy. But fuel subsidy was actually benefiting the rich. It was. So fuel subsidies were actually keeping the rich richer, because it's our public collective savings that were used to subsidize that, and benefited the wealthy disproportionately, and obviously drained our public finances, but I think that one of the mindsets that we have in poor countries would be that I just need to get to see tomorrow. I really am not thinking about the future if I can't even get by today. And yeah, to some extent that is valid, but nobody is ever going to rise with that kind of mindset, right? Like, you have to think about the future. you know. It's time that we actually start reading about things like, why was subsidy removed, you know, instead of just talking about, oh, it was removed, oh, that's so bad, oh, now fuel is expensive, you know. Actually, it makes better things, it makes better sense if it is removed, because it's not even benefiting you in the long run, right? Unless you don't believe in the long run and you want to leave like the continent or the country more expensive for your children, right? So yeah, that's ideology. Also, one of the things that will fall under ideology would be sort of feed the masses, right? I think there was a country that also did something like that, feed the masses. At the end of the day, because they were all setting out policies that kept food cheap, farmers were not able to make profit and they were not able to, you know, produce much, which now worsened food security. So really, first is ignorance, then there is ideology, like just political ideology, things that sound so good. War against indiscipline. Now we're going to start to handcuff anybody that is not standing in the queue or waiting their turn. You know, at the end of the day, there are better ways, right, to set out policies that address a particular problem to give it an outcome than just riding on popular ideologies that are not sustainable or even workable or even results driven, you know. So yeah, that's number 2. And the third one, very quickly, is inertia. Inertia is to keep something moving that is already, you know, moving, right? Just to keep it moving. And that's the problem. I think this is where I don't think there is one African nation or basically one poor country or one country with colonial history that is safe from this. And that's, let's say, continuing with the education in the manner that it was handed over to them or to that particular country. You have to break away from whatever was handed to you and form what works for you now. It's like theoretically just drawing cockroaches in SS2. No, I think really we have to have practical education that really is solving problem, education that is showing kids how much, you know, how the world works, where they belong in the world, how, you know, how much of a future they cannot attain because of where they're coming from. And these are the kind of syllabus that would inspire a set of creative destruction in entrepreneurship that can propel us, right? Because catch up, if you're gonna be playing catch up, you would always be number 2. You would never, obviously that's what catch up means, right? And you will never really catch up, because just when you're trying to get in line, another thing comes up. It's AI, it's the moon, it's the stars. Oh, we don't live on Earth anymore. So yeah, really, we just need to break away from that outdated curricula, you know. And then also for inertia is really just continuing with the status quo because it's easier. So one other thing would be some culture that do not serve us. One of them is seniority, you know. Like, we respect elders, which is so beautiful, but also we should have, like, we should encourage a culture that would tell young people, go get it, rather than, you think I did not try during my time? What makes you think you can do it? I think that's our culture. Like, maybe not culture, that's our energy, and that shouldn't be, right? So yeah, ignorance, inertia, and ideology are the three I's. So to conclude, ideology births the policy, ignorance implements it in a place that it's not fit for, and then inertia carries it on and it keeps going even though it's no longer relevant. And so I think that we critically, in our institutions, in even our personal lives, we can look at our systems and see where these three I's are actually forcing things that should have ended to continue, particularly in our academic system on the continent. There is no reason why we should be defining things rather than explaining how it works practically in the labs.